Good morning, Lucia. Thank you so much, as always, for being with us. We're coming to you live from the studios of the Government Information Service National Television Network. I am Lisa Joseph on this Wednesday, very rainy Wednesday. And at this time, it's always the morning update with Lisa and Homer. Good morning to Homer DeMark.
Good morning, Lisa, and good morning to those of you joining us on Channel 122, our Facebook and the YouTube channels as well. We always appreciate your presence here on the morning update. Yeah, it's been rainy. Yesterday it was rainy. Today it was rainy, and yesterday I almost got into the place where, why must it rain? But then I remembered the plants and the agriculture and the fact that we actually need the rain to ensure that we don't go into drought. And I got into the place where gratitude was. Thank you for the rain.
Absolutely.
I will take it, yes.
And funny, a family member was saying the same thing this morning. I was like, let's just take the rain. And as you mentioned the drought, I mentioned that as well. But most importantly, we need our pipe-borne water.
Yes. Yes.
So
very true.
So we need the water flowing from the tap, and so we don't want to complicate things any further for Wasco, and so we say thank you very much and good morning to the good people over at Wasco. you have to be super nice. Super nice to Wasco.
I'm not getting involved.
Okay. All right. Great. So that being said, Homer, today we have an interesting lineup. I'm really excited about being able to share with all of St. Lucia because that has not been shared as yet, and I don't believe that many individuals would have had the opportunity to perhaps join the Facebook page for the Nobel Laureate Festival. But we will share with you the feature address which was delivered by development economist Dr. Claudius Prevel at the wreath laying ceremony for our Nobel laureates. That took place on Friday, the 21st of January, just before Nobel Laureate Day, which is January 23rd. So it is a very, very important address that he delivered. And he did such a wonderful job in being able to break down the economy and relate it to everyday terms. So we will be getting to that feature address a little later on. But first, and he did make mention of the pandemic and how it's affecting the economy and so forth, and it will surprise you. So, but first we want to get to what our situation is today on the update for COVID-19.
Sure, I can definitely do that. Yesterday, the 25th of January, the Ministry of Health, Wellness and Elderly Affairs received a confirmation of 212 new cases of COVID-19. These samples were processed on Monday, January 24th, 2022, from a total of 563 samples, 468 of which were from the Ezra Long Laboratory and 95 samples from Laboratory Services and Consultations Limited. These samples were collected on January 24th and 25th, 2022, and the number of positive cases makes up 37.66% of all samples processed on that date. These new cases bring the total number of diagnosed cases in country to 19,967. Confirmation was also received of a recovery of 189 individuals diagnosed with COVID-19, bringing the number of active cases in country to 4,187. Currently, there are 54 positive cases of COVID-19 admitted at the respiratory hospital, of which 5 of them are severely ill. The Ministry of Health also reported 1 new COVID-19 death and 1 new COVID-19 related death in yesterday's update. Again, the Ministry of Health is expressing condolences to the loved ones of these individuals. The Ministry of Health, Wellness and Elderly Affairs for quite some time have been telling us that vaccination is one of the ways in which we can protect ourselves, keep ourselves safe and protected from severe illness from the COVID-19 pandemic. So if you are looking to be vaccinated today, just to remind you of the vaccination sites today, the VG Sports Complex, St. Anthony's Medical Center, and that is in VA4, the Denry Mothers Preschool, and that is between the hours of 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Again, you can go to the VG Sports Complex, that is in VG, St. Anthony's Medical Center in VA4, and Denry Mothers Preschool from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. You know, you could always make an appointment at your nearest wellness center. You could give them a call and see when they are getting people vaccinated, but you can go ahead and get vaccinated today.
All right, Bon, thank you so much for that, Hilma. And of course, just a reminder for you to just follow all of the protocols. I know that some people are still having difficulty with adhering to wearing of the mask. I did witness an incident with someone being so belligerent when they're asked to wear the mask in order for them to access public services. And we ought not to still be at that place.
Yeah, I think we should be well past this.
We should be, yes, absolutely well past, and just understand that it's not being done to punish you in any way, but it is really to keep you safe and everyone else around you safe. And, you know, I was thinking, you know, if we can't see the virus, we can't touch the virus, but it is everywhere, and that's the thing.
That's what makes it deadly. That's what makes it
the inherent danger is that you do not know where it is, but it is everywhere, and you do not know who has it.
So it's best to just assume everybody has it.
Exactly. And if you were to operate from that standpoint, you would want to so very much protect yourself. Just to think of if we were, look, when we had the explosion over in St. Vincent de la Soufriere volcano, all of that ash coming through over here. Some communities of ours had more ash fall than others. You, at that point, because of that poor air quality, you want to wear that mask. You know, if we had just heavy Saharan dust, you would want to wear that mask to protect yourself because you think you can see all of the, you know, that cloud of plume of ash and so forth. Think of it in that way. You can't see the virus, but it is everywhere.
And it's so easily transmissible. Think of touching a doorknob and unconsciously touching your face, unconsciously scratching, maybe you have an itch on your nose.
Yes.
And you actually, it's so easy. It is so easy. And you may think it's coming in contact with people, it is one of the ways, yes, you can spread it, which is why the 6 feet distance is so important. But it's so
someone
easily
who touched the
transmissible.
surface, and you don't know, unknowingly, you touch that same surface within a given period of time, and there you have it. You have gotten infected.
Somebody's not wearing a mask, they speak, you know, the water droplets.
So just wear the mask and do not abuse the gatekeepers, if you will. Please don't abuse the gatekeepers. They're really doing it for your own interest and my interest, all of our interests. So we want to congratulate, let's congratulate. Before we get to the congratulations, let's get to an update on the situation over at Badlil, the slope stabilization project happening there. How terrifying it was when we saw that whole part of that going down. So they are experiencing some challenges there on that project, the Badlil slope stabilization project. But despite that, they are continuing to advance. And the land slippage associated with heavy rainfall, if you would have remembered, that happened in April 2021, and that resulted in a section of the roadway collapsing. As it's so terrifying when we saw that. We go now to the communications officer within the Ministry of Infrastructure, Port, Transport, Physical Development and Urban Renewal, Miguel Favre, for an update on what has been happening on that project.
On April 29, 2021, heavy rainfall resulted in the collapse of a section of the Bardillo Ridgeway, as you can see to my back. As the Department of Infrastructure seeks to restore this section of the roadway, we have encountered a few difficulties since the project began on December 1st, 2021. Aaron's Heavy Equipment Rentals Limited is the company contracted to undertake the project. It comprises 3 stages: drainage works, slope stabilization, and the road reinstatement, the final phase. Engineer Janelle Favre is the project manager and represents the Department of Infrastructure, Ports, and Transport.
Currently, the phase that we're dealing with now is the slope stabilization. We know on April 29, 2021, there was a major landslide, right, which caused us to lose half of the carriageway. And currently what we're trying to do is reinstate it as in soonest time possible.
Challenges experienced by the contractor since the December 1st, 2021 commencement range from the weather to balancing the ongoing works with the safety of both motorists and workers.
Taking into consideration where we are, we're in the rainforest. So it's constantly humid, moisture, it's constantly raining. Also, the terrain that we're dealing with, it's an unstable slope. If you notice, to the back of me, we have not closed the road. It's a major thoroughfare. It contributes to economic development, so we cannot close this road. I mean, being here from December 1st, every 10 minutes we find a container truck or construction truck moving through this place. So it's not possible for us to close the road. And with the heavy equipment and unstable slope, what we have is a lot of vibrations. So you understand the difficulty, the sensitivity of this kind of project.
One unforeseen challenge was the presence of subterranean water, owing to the Bardillo's high water table as a result of the constant rains. To compound the situation, there has been further slippage since the slope stabilization project commenced.
Some slippages, and like I said, it's as a result of we have rain. So the soil is saturated. We also have heavy equipment, trucks going up and down, so the vibrations. So we've had to have some places on the site where we had shoring to protect the workers who are working at the bottom of the slope.
Okay, that said, we understand there have been issues with motorists stopping, their curiosity being piqued at the project.
Oh yes, we've had that issue. I think on more than one occasion we had motorists actually stopping, parking their vehicles and coming out on the site to take pictures. And we had to explain to them the nature of the site. They're not allowed to do that because what they do, they also hinder the traffic coming up, or hinder the flow of traffic. And what we don't want is all that traffic piling up in an unstable slope.
Despite the challenges, however, the project manager says the project is steadily progressing. Motorists are advised to exercise extreme caution when traversing the Bardillo, particularly in the vicinity of the ongoing works. The project is expected to be completed by the end of March 2022. Reporting from the site of the Bardillo Slope Stabilization Project, I am Miguel Favre for the Ministry of Infrastructure, Ports, Transport, Physical Development and Urban Renewal.
I reported then the update home on what's happening down over at the Bardillo. Very, very important roadway for us. It's a thoroughfare, it's a connector between the north and south of the island. And you can tell how important the Bardillo is. If you can just take your travel down there, park, and you could just see those number of container trucks that travel the road on a daily basis. So we could know that it's important to the business of the country. It's important to be able for us to be able to travel back and forth for people coming to work and so forth. Our visitors, people traveling, the Heronor International Airport down in the south. So it's important for us to be able to have that roadway there functioning, safe and stable. Very, very critical for us. So we're happy that it is advancing. So on to other good news. On the world stage, we want to say good morning to Miss St. Lucia World and Miss Tyler Theophan. So the Miss World organization announced their 40 semi-finalists, and we know that the contest had sort of a was on a pause, on a long
yes.
pause.
Just about 3 months.
Yeah,
90 days.
I mean, it's only 3 months. They had to pause it because of COVID-19.
Yes.
But we're happy that, you know, the contestants, because they all worked so hard for them to be able to get onto that world stage.
Sure.
However, Miss St. Lucia World did not advance to the semi-finals, but we certainly want to wish her all the best and say thank you, you know, ultimately, because it is a huge undertaking for you now to put yourself out there, for you to represent your country, and the sort of rigorous preparation that went into participating there for the Miss World contest. Nothing easy.
Yeah, I agree, Lisa. And when it comes to pageantry, and especially on such a grand scale, I'm very sure that although she did not advance, and it may be a bit of a disappointment, she can walk away with certain lessons that she's gained from the experience, which is always nice, a nice developmental opportunity from people that you speak to. Also, networking. Yeah. These are people from across the world, and the camaraderie that you see. If you followed her page, they were the networking opportunities it's beyond. So if she did take advantage of that, she is walking away with something. And the fact that, you know, St. Lucia was there and was represented, does also speak to our country benefiting from the representation as well. So yes, it may be a little disappointing, and in all competitions, I could imagine, you know, at first there's disappointment, but we always see silver lining. Always look for the silver lining.
Yes.
Yeah.
That personal development is very, very important. And also to the projects that you'd undertaken, because for Miss World, you need to have a platform, and there was a project component to that. And she did engage in the building of a home,
yes,
for a single mother. So that individual will be forever grateful to Tyler for selecting her and so forth. So there is always, as you said, that silver lining, the good stuff coming along there as well. The countries that the participants, the contestants advancing from the countries, the following countries: Argentina, the Bahamas, Botswana, Brazil, Cameroon, Canada, Chile, China, Colombia, Cote d'Ivoire, Czech Republic, the Dominican Republic, Ecuador, England, France, Guinea, Hungary, Iceland, India, Indonesia, Ireland, Kenya, Madagascar, Malaysia, Mexico, Mongolia, Nepal, Nicaragua, Northern Ireland, Paraguay, the Philippines, Poland, Puerto Rico, Somalia, South Africa, Sri Lanka, Trinidad and Tobago, the United States, Venezuela, and Vietnam. So congratulations to all of those contestants there. And we're looking forward to bigger things and continued progress for Miss St. Lucia World for 2021, Miss Tyler Theophan. Yeah?
Yes, indeed.
All right, so what we'll do, we'll take a very quick break, and when we come back, that featured dress that I have been so raving about is up next.
Sons and all the daughters, the island now St. Lucia, the place that's full of culture, beautiful people, good character, big mountains, good for adventure, driving volcano, you feel you can enter, natural resources, place to remember, right banana, cause of a jelly water, no one in this world that I go, nobody can tell me what I know, could I England, Grenada, Tokyo, no place like Lucia, no, St. Lucia, my little Chacalisco, number one on my list now, even when your own people, them hate you, and I will never forsake you, sons and all the daughters, the island of St. Lucia, the place that's full of culture.
So relevant. It's okay. There we go. Live TV. You caught me saying it is so relevant. So, indeed, we were just commenting that the Love St. Lucia campaign dovetails so very well into the upcoming feature address delivered by
really
Dr.
does.
Claudius Prever, development economist, and he was speaking at the wreath-laying ceremony that was held in honor of our two Nobel laureates, Sir Derek Walcott and Sir Arthur Lewis.
I would like this short lecture to go beyond the pure economic theory and instead to focus on the practical application of economics to solve the pressing challenge of St. Lucia today. Knowledge, of course, is of little use unless we organize it into targeted plans to bring about a desired result. This seems to be the problem in our country today. Basic knowledge is everywhere, but its application using targeted plans is sorely lacking. The lack of adequate levels of national savings means that we have to turn to foreign investment to fuel growth of our economy. Given St. Lucia's current economic circumstances, very high debt, increasing unemployment, and severe economic contraction since the onset of COVID-19, unless we have foreign investment flows into specific sectors to drive economic growth, our economy will sputter at best. I want to now present a picture of our economy for the last decade, from 2010 to 2019. And my purpose for doing this is to cause you to understand that there are some macroeconomic fundamentals that are hindering our progress to economic growth. Let's begin with the gross domestic product and the sectoral contributions to GDP. And I'm using data from the Economic and Social Review, different publications, 2020, 2019, etc. What we see there is that the accommodation and food services sector accounts for about 20% of the GDP. Real estate about 10%, wholesale and retail trade, distributive trades about 10%, financial services, government services, etc. about 5% each, transport and communication about 4% each, education, entertainment industry about 3%, manufacturing 3%. These sectors taken together make up about 83% of the real economy of St. Lucia between the period 2010 to 2019, on the average. Taxes contribute 13.5% of our GDP. What I want you to understand here is that the St. Lucian economy is, of course, primarily a services-driven economy, 95% of which is services, and we have a fringe of agriculture. Together with manufacturing, they only account for 5% of our GDP. And therefore, central to economic growth would be growth of the top 10 sectors of the economy. Let us turn now to the growth in gross domestic product itself. I have spoken about the sectoral composition of gross domestic product. What about the growth? The average real economic growth in St. Lucia for the last decade has been 1.1%. Can you imagine that? 1.1% in real terms. You've had years of booms where you had 5% and so on, but you've had years of busts. And so, during that decade, growth reached a high point of 4.6% in 2011, but then it went to a low of negative 2% in 2013. Gross domestic value added, which is the extent to which an economy, we the people actually add value to production, that also averaged only about 2.1% in the high points of growth, and it was down negative 1.1% in 2013. And so therefore, we see that growth has been sluggish, even before the advent of COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, pointing to the fact that the macroeconomic fundamentals have been weak for quite some time, and that the pandemic has merely exacerbated the woes of a weak economy. I want to now focus on the economy in the current situation, and that is using data for 2020, the year when the COVID virus got to our shores. The GDP in 2020 in current prices decreased 23.7%. 23.7%. In real terms, the decrease was 20.4%. And the value added just behind that, 20.3%. Why are these numbers important? I don't want to just throw the numbers at you, but why are they important? What we are witnessing is a loss in the national stock of wealth of about 1/5 in 1 year. More disheartening is the absolute loss in wealth of every St. Lucian, as per capita GDP has also fallen. Per capita GDP actually fell 24.2% from $11,771 US in 2019 to $8,923 US in 2020 on the average. Third, the unofficial unemployment rate has also showed a negative development. Unemployment has increased from 16.8% of the workforce in 2019 to 21.7% in 2020. In terms of actual numbers of human beings, we're talking about 16,998 people who were unemployed in 2019. And we have now 20,774 unemployed in 2020. And so there is, in fact, we have a situation of a surplus labor supply in the market. There has been debate that we're a small economy with a small population, 180,000 people. How do we have a surplus labor? Well, surplus labor is not a concept that applies only if you are large. The surplus is actually a relative term. So if you have a small population of 100,000 people actually seeking employment and 20,000 are unemployed, you have a labor surplus, okay? And this is where the Louisiana model of growth becomes relevant to St. Lucia today. The other part of the story I want to tell you in terms of the economy in 2020 has to do with the central government's fiscal operations. Fiscal year 2019-2020, the total revenue declined by 22.3%. But yet, total expenditure increased slightly by 1.8%. And so the overall balance, the central balance, the government central balance deteriorated significantly by $190.8 million, or some 151.6%. Of course, this is government in crisis times. But I'm making the point that the underlying fundamentals from 2010 to 2019 had been there. And so what we witnessed in the year of COVID in 2020 was a mere exacerbation of the problem that already existed. The public debt to GDP also grew by 10.4% between 2019 and 2020. And more worrisome for us, the external component of the public debt went from 29.5% of GDP to 44.6% of GDP. And these are some of the critical issues. The other area of poor performance is the merchandise foreign trade, where we see imports decline in 2020 because of the COVID virus by 15.7%. But exports declined even more by 32.7%, pushing more pressure on the current account balance of St. Lucia. The final part of the story I want to talk about in terms of the central government performance in 2019-2020 is the story on the money supply and credit. The money supply actually decreased as measured M2, the broad supply of money. It reduced by 6.8% in 2020 compared to 2019. But net credit to the central government increased 17.7%. And the private sector, which is the one charged with the mandate to resuscitate the economy, they only got 2.7% increase in credit. So why did all of this happen? When I analyze the root cause, we see that we have created an economy that has become reliant almost exclusively on tourism. There is a surplus labor pool of a not very specialized quality, and that surplus labor pool is being tapped into by the hotel sector, which makes profits at the expense of the rest of the economy, while real wages remain low. The general neglect of agriculture, which had been the sector of the working class capitalists back in the 1980s and 1990s, has been relegated to workers and farmers to a labor reserve. And so, one would think, in light of those developments, the policymakers of the day would have looked at a response proportionate to the plight of the people of St. Lucia. But even then, the policy response to the COVID-19 that we saw left a lot to be desired. Agriculture. We witnessed significant increases in the growth of agriculture in Antigua and Barbuda, St. Kitts and Nevis, and even Barbados. All of which do not have the arable land that St. Lucia possesses. But in St. Lucia, we saw the converse happening. Our economy was shrinking on the agricultural front, and banana exports, the good barometer for that measure, reduced by 27.7%. The gross domestic product, the GDP, is positively correlated to our consumption, but is inversely correlated to our imports. And so if we have an economy that is primarily import consumption oriented, the net effect on economic growth could well be negative. Okay? So what is the way forward for the St. Lucian economy? I have a few points to say. And I note Honourable Minister Sean Edwards seemed a little bit bewildered when I said the numbers were not looking so good. Good news for him is that what I'm seeing on the horizon is that the real GDP for St. Lucia is expected to grow by about 8% in the year 2021. And that's based on my own private conversations with the ones who are doing the analysis. And St. Lucia may see double-digit growth in 2022. So I think we're moving in the right direction. But how do we sustain it? Are we moving in the right direction by accident? Or are we moving in the right direction consciously? That's what I want to address in the latter part of my presentation. When we examine the data, and I know time is a bit of a constraint, I don't want to take too much more of your time, but I think that story has to be told. When we examine some of the data I discussed earlier on, what emerges is the urgent need for economic transformation as well as diversification. Transformation. This country now requires a growth and transformation plan. You cannot grow an economy on one sector, which is now tourism, on top of the fact that it doesn't have the multiplier to ensure all the labor supply will be absorbed. It is not going to raise the wages because the labor supply, of course, is too vast. The diversification I have in mind will call for a number of things. And among them, in this current time, we have to apply electronic commerce. We have to look at ways of exporting goods and services that lend themselves to utilizing platforms driven by electronic commerce. We have to also take more advantage of the opportunities that are available to us in the multitude of FTAs we have negotiated. We have the CARICOM agreement. We have the OECS Economic Union. We have the CARIFORUM EU-EPA. We have bilateral agreements with the United States and Canada. And the utilization of those agreements is where the problem lies. We need capital. Capital remains a central factor for growth, even though it has been exaggerated in the past. So Arthur Lewis's work, along with people like Ross Solo, demonstrated that total factor productivity actually increases a lot faster when we have skilled labor in our production. Capital accounts for only about 40% of the growth observed using the simple Harrod-Domer model. If we bring in other factors like skilled labor and technology, growth actually accelerates much faster. And so I want to conclude by throwing out some challenges to the government, because economics cannot work in a vacuum. Economists can make recommendations on what needs to be done, but there has to be the policymakers, they have to be persuaded to take the right initiatives and to ensure that the policies and plans they pursue will result in economic growth. Moving forward, St. Lucia's agriculture share of GDP has to increase to a target level of at least 5% by 2030. At least. Because what has happened in St. Lucia is that food production per head has declined stupendously from the turn of the century. And if we are not careful, there is a food crisis looming on the horizon. What COVID has taught us is how vulnerable this nation actually is. I recall telling my wife just a few days ago, went to the supermarket, I could not find any brown sugar. Supply chain issues. But supply chains, yes, but also there are issues of production and consumption we don't understand. We have to become, not insular, but we have to become mindful, more mindful of the fact that our economy is too open and vulnerable, and there is a need to grow our economy in line with what the sensible people out there do. And to give you an idea, in the United States today, as developed and progressive as the United States is, my last review of data for the economy, agriculture accounts for 5.2% of the GDP. I'm talking about trillions of dollars, right? Massive economy, 5.2% of the GDP is in agriculture. Second, and in fact, before I move on from that point, there is already Taiwanese technical cooperation, and there is a 7 crop initiative and other things going on. Government needs to leverage these cooperation arrangements, but they need to also have economic growth strategy, a deliberate one, not one that is going to happen accidentally. They need to decide, we want to grow this sector. How much capital is required? How much labor? What types? What varieties? Where do I source them? These things have to be done. We need economic planners, again, working in the government's office, otherwise we're not going anywhere. Manufacturing. Manufacturing has to increase the share of GDP, and in my view, by at least 10% by 2030. You might say, manufacturing what? Manufacturing of today is not what it used to be 20 years ago. About 80% of international trade is the exchange in the movement of intermediate products, not final finished products. So you're making a cell phone, someone sends the chips from maybe the US to China, the circuit design is done somewhere, maybe in Hong Kong, the battery is developed somewhere else. You have a multitude of countries involved in what we call a global supply chain. And everyone is adding value at different stages of that supply chain. So, in other words, our manufacturing sector of today need not focus on building a car or building, something that requires extensive capital and resources. No. we need to focus on where can we add value in the supply chain. An example that comes to mind, for example, we have cement. Cement production. Construction is a very critical sector. So Arthur himself discovered that every time there was prosperity during his Princeton years in the United States, he discovered every time the United States had periods of prosperity, the growth always came from the railways, the transport sector, construction. When these things boomed, the economy boomed. When those things did not boom, the economy actually collapsed. And so, what we need to understand, if we will, for example, establish a cement bagging entity in St. Lucia, we have the CARICOM Treaty. We can import the cement from Trinidad. We can establish the unit somewhere in St. Lucia, in a massive warehouse. The people there can add value by packaging the cement. And then we can distribute the cement from there to the rest of the OECS countries through what? The Economic Union Treaty. I'm just throwing an example out there. We have to start using our imagination because those agreements are there. We have made the use of our services of negotiators for many years, but we don't use them. We have to start firing back at imagination and give the manufacturing sector a voice in the economy. And of course, third, we have to concern ourselves with the services transformation I spoke about. In that transformation, I see an important role for the entertainment sector. That sector has been growing rapidly. And from all the conventional forms, like for example, our jazz, vintage jazz, people like Bo Hinkson, to the not so conventional ones, like the Dennery segment. That sector is now larger. Entertainment now accounts for 3% and more of our GDP. Agriculture is 1.7%. To give you an idea how ridiculous things are getting in St. Lucia. So we can't grow enough food to feed ourselves, but we are big on entertainment. But entertainment now, what we can do with that is to leverage it on the export side, right? We could export some of those services and not just produce it only for home consumption, which I enjoy. But we need to, the market is too small, let us also let the rest of the world consume those services. The services share has to be targeted to 85% of GDP by 2050. And why I say 2050 is that, of course, we will have a demographic transition, right? As time goes by, the workforce in agriculture from many years ago will get old. It'll be retired. But there are new people coming on. There's new life coming to St. Lucia. So we need to aim that transformation strategy primarily at those emerging from the ranks of the primary and secondary school system now. And not just, I want to say this, not only just getting a degree, because we must not forget, knowledge acquisition on its own will not solve the problem. Right? And I think Sir Arthur Bliss himself recognized this. Knowledge is only potential power. It's not power itself. We must apply it. In closing, government also needs to articulate a new vision and set target levels of growth deliberately. Plans by which the growth can be realized and actively pursue the growth rates. If we are truly desirous of bringing out economic growth and transformation in the St. Lucian economy. Economic growth will not be in line with any specific number unless government first decides on it. That's the government's role. They must decide on it, formulate the plans for it by which it's going to happen, and then implement the plans on a regular and continuous basis. Sadly, we have become a nation where the international financial institutions, the IMF, the World Bank, and others, they come in, spend a few weeks, they sit with our technocrats, and they tell us what our growth rates will be. We are handed a portion. This is what you deserve. But of course, they do so based on the fact that they have observed our plans carefully, and they have observed that there is no deliberate plan or strategy for better results. Our nation can and must do better. And personally, I would like to see us in Lucia that grows by 10% annually. And there is no reason why it cannot be done if we deliberately decide to do so. The growth numbers we expect for the next couple of years are optimistic looking, but they're not our own making. They are accidental numbers. We need to now put in the numbers that we want to see manifest in the lives of St. Lucians on a continuous basis. St. Lucia has a lot of catching up to do, having lost more than 1/5 of our wealth in 2020 alone. And so, in the words of the famous West Indian Commission, which Sir Paul Lewis was a member of, I want to use those famous lines and say, it is time for action. Thank you very much.
That feature address delivered there by Dr. Claudia Spravel, development economist, Homer, looking at St. Lucia's economy. And as I said at the top of the program, I thought he did a brilliant job in being able to analyze the economy. And you know, it's such a complex issue. It is something that, I don't easily understand, the ordinary Joe and Jane won't, but Dr. Spravel was able to really make it relatable to everyone so that we can understand how the economy works, what is happening within the economy today, and how we can remedy the situation, because there are some very worrying statistics that he brought up. And I thought it was very telling when he made the point that we're not making enough food for us to consume, to eat, but our entertainment sector is certainly contributing some 3% and more to the GDP. And that is purely really within that local consumption. So we need to be able to add value to what we're doing within the economy. Brilliant when he spoke on the aspect of how do we add that value, and manufacturing, very, very critical sector in the contributing to the GDP, but it is sluggishly at 3% and has been that way for years. And so when he spoke about how can we add value to the manufacturing sector, how can we do things differently, and speaking about being able to simply take a product or manufacture one aspect of a product, and he brought up the whole mobile phones, and which is so true. That is the trend right now in the world. So one part is done in China, another in Malaysia, Taiwan is doing something else, India is doing something else. And so when you pick up your cell phone, that cell phone has been manufactured in at least 5 to 6 countries before coming to you. So indeed, things are changing globally, and we need to be able to position ourselves. Another important thing is, Homer, we often say this, that things like CARICOM and the OECS, these treaties, what do they do for us and so forth. But here he is, and he is best suited to really understand and know that we are not utilizing these instruments as we should, and that if we really go in there and tap into them and make use of it, we can see things do a huge turnaround for benefit.
You're right, Lisa. There were quite a few gems in that lecture indeed. And of all the important things he said, one of the things that stood out for me was the fact that COVID-19 has shown our vulnerability and how vulnerable our economy is. The aspect of food security and the fact that we need to boost our food security was extremely important, and that's something that, yes, we've been seeing throughout the pandemic, how easy it is for our economy to be disrupted because we have one main focus, and the importance of diversification of our economy. That is extremely important as well. The use of e-commerce, which is another thing that the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us. The lessons, again, the COVID-19 pandemic has made us all miserable, but there are lessons to take away, and not just for us individually, but as a nation as well, looking towards our development, we're seeing our soft spots, our weak points that need to be bolstered. And these are a lot of points that he made that really resonated with me. The importance of e-commerce in our business, ensuring that we maybe need to start educating our small business people on the use of e-commerce. What are the easiest ways that you can implement it? These are the little things, the takeaways that really, really did resonate with me, because these are things that we really are seeing. We hear about the numbers for agriculture, which is really alarming, but if you're not an economist, 1.7% is just 1.7%. But when you put it in relation to the other sectors, you're like, wait, as much as I don't understand what 1.7% really is in real life.
It doesn't sit right. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound right. So what can we start doing as individuals to start thinking of food security? Because we can't expect the government to sit, yes, they do have an important role to play, but to sit and say, okay, how do we feed? How am I feeding myself and my family? What can I do?
And I think that is, the aspect of the transformation that is also speaking about, the idea of that individual consumption patterns,
right.
and how we now need to really understand that you're not barring yourself from enjoying any other products, but you need to understand that your dollar, how your dollar is going to grow and where it is going to benefit most.
Going back to your point of the Love St. Lucia campaign and its importance.
And I think too that we're not aware of all of the things, services and products that St. Lucia produces until you really go searching. Yes, you would be surprised to see what is coming out of St. Lucia, the top quality products that are coming out. Sometimes I look and I see the packaging, and then when I read things, and I'm like, wait, this was made here. So very, very critical for us to support what is nationally made, homegrown made, because at the end of the day, that is how we are going to bolster. That is your individual, part of your individual contribution to being able to sustain the local economy. So very, very critical. And I know that there are a few companies in St. Lucia that they do manufacture products specifically for the international market.
Mm-hmm.
There are international companies that would tap at certain doors and say, listen, I need you to do X for me, water, juices, whatever it is, but that is only for me to be able to sell in Europe and so forth. We have a few companies that are doing that, but we need to do more of that, and more of that adding the value.
And it cannot be something that's coincidental or something that happens just because. We do need to make a deliberate effort to ensure that we're supporting local. And when we say support local, not necessarily just, today I'm buying. It needs to become a lifestyle, and lifestyle changes are what going to get us to the finish line that we want to get to. So it's very important to sit back and say, oh my goodness, 1.7%. That's terrible, but what are you doing to contribute to it? And you may say, again, I cannot save the world. We're not asking you to save the world. We're asking you to just, make one contribution.
One little step is all it really takes.
Yeah,
a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step.
One step, exactly.
One step. So that's our home stretch, Omar. It has been a pleasure. We will be doing it all over again. Listen, Homo on the Morning Update. Signing out. See you next time.